It was a cold and rainy night, typical of autumn, when Emily left a party at a friend's house. She was exhausted, her eyes tired from the fun and hustle and bustle of the party. The rain fell incessantly, creating a curtain of water that obscured the view of the night city. Emily knew she shouldn't drive in the adverse weather conditions, so she grabbed her cell phone and called an Uber to take her home. While waiting at the curb, the app indicated that the driver, whose name appeared as John, was on his way. Emily wrapped her coat around her to protect herself from the rain and looked around, hoping the car would arrive soon. Finally, the black Uber car approached and stopped in front of her. The driver activated the hazard lights, signaling that it was his car. Emily made a gesture of thanks to the driver and got into the back seat of the vehicle. The driver, a middle-aged man with gray hair and a serious expression, greeted Emily with a nod and a good evening. She responded politely and gave the address where she wanted to be taken. The car's tires squealed on the wet road as the Uber began to move. At first, the trip went smoothly. The rain hitting the windshield created a relaxing sound, and Emily felt drowsy. She leaned her head against the seat and closed her eyes for a moment, not realizing that the journey was heading into unfamiliar territory. When Emily finally opened her eyes, she realized that the scenery around her was unfamiliar. She looked out the window and saw that the streets they were passing through were not the ones that would take her home. A feeling of confusion enveloped her. "Sorry, I think you're going in the wrong direction," Emily said, her voice sounding shaky. She checked the Uber app on her phone, which showed they were heading off the beaten path. The driver, however, did not respond. He continued driving in silence, without making any comments or corrections to the route. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. Something was wrong, and she knew it. She grabbed her cell phone and quickly typed a message to her boyfriend, Alex, informing him of her location and her feeling that something wasn't right. However, before she could send the message, the driver turned onto a dark, isolated street, far from the city lights. Emily's heart started to beat faster. She felt a knot in her stomach and the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She looked around, trying to recognize the area, but all she saw were dark, desolate roads with no sign of other cars or people in sight. That's when Emily realized that the driver hadn't followed the Uber app's route. She was in an unfamiliar place, at the mercy of a stranger whose intentions were a mystery. The driver finally broke the eerie silence. In a soft, cold voice, he said, "You don't need your cell phone anymore, Emily." Emily felt a shiver of terror. She held her cell phone tightly, ready to use the device as a means of defense. But before he could react, the driver reached out and, with a quick movement, snatched the cell phone from his hands. "What are you doing? Where are we going?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. The driver did not respond. He just kept driving down the dark road, and Emily knew she was in danger. She was in a car with a stranger in an unfamiliar place, and there was no one to help her. If she wanted to survive this night, she would have to take drastic measures. Emily was trapped in the back seat of the Uber car, her heart pounding. The driver, whose name remained unknown, had stolen her cell phone, and she felt completely vulnerable. The rain continued to fall outside, obscuring any sign of help. As the driver drove down dark, unfamiliar roads, Emily tried to remain calm and think of a plan of action. She looked inside the car, looking for anything she could use as a weapon or a way to escape. That's when she saw a small flashlight on the car's console. Without the driver noticing, Emily silently picked her up. She knew that the darkness of the night was her ally, and the flashlight might be her only chance to defend herself. With the flashlight in hand, Emily waited for the right moment to act. She noticed that the driver seemed less attentive while driving on a narrow, winding road. The rain continued to fall, further obscuring the view outside. It was then that Emily decided to attack. With a quick movement, she turned on the flashlight, pointing it directly at the driver's face. The intense light surprised him, causing him to momentarily lose control of the car. "What the hell are you doing?" He screamed, blinded by the light. Seizing the opportunity, Emily opened the car door and jumped out. She fell to the wet asphalt, her clothes soaked from the rain. With her heart racing, she stood up and ran to the side of the road, disappearing into the darkness. The Uber driver stopped the car, furious and disoriented. He tried to look for Emily, but the heavy rain and darkness made the task almost impossible. Emily knew she needed to stay hidden and find help as quickly as possible. She continued running down the road, not knowing where she was going. Adrenaline was driving her, and she was determined to escape her pursuer. The trees around her created an eerie atmosphere, and the sound of rain on the foliage made it more frightening. As Emily ran, she realized that she was not far from a residential area. The distant lights of houses offered a glimmer of hope. She reached a busier road and flagged down a passing car. The driver, a kind woman, stopped and allowed Emily to get in. "Are you okay?" "What happened?" the woman asked, worried. Emily quickly explained the situation, mentioning the Uber driver and how he had taken her to an unfamiliar place. The woman took her to the nearest police station, where Emily reported the incident to authorities. Police immediately traced the driver's identity and discovered that he had used a fake name on the Uber app. The investigation was ongoing, and Emily felt relieved to be safe at the police station. However, the terrifying experience still haunted her. She could not understand why the driver had taken her to an unknown place and what he intended to do. Questions lingered in her mind, and she knew she needed answers. Emily decided she wouldn't rest until she discovered the truth about that Uber driver and made sure no one else went through the same nightmare. She was determined to reveal the sinister story behind that night of terror. In the days following the terrifying incident with the Uber driver, Emily was determined to uncover the truth behind that dark night. She couldn't forget the feeling of dread and the questions that still tormented her. Who was the driver? Why did he take her to an unknown place? And, most importantly, what did he intend to do? Emily refused to sit idly by. She began investigating on her own, looking for clues that would lead her to the driver's identity and his true intention that night. His first step was to revisit the Uber app and analyze all the details of the trip. She noted that the driver's name was listed as John, but there was no photograph associated with that profile. She realized this was a clear violation of company policy. Emily contacted Uber support, explaining the situation and asking for information about the driver. She received an initial automated response, but nothing that helped clarify the identity of John. She knew she would have to go deeper. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily began revisiting the area where the incident occurred. She drove through the dark, eerie roads, looking for any sign of suspicious activity. However, she found nothing that led her to solid leads. So, she decided to focus on the Uber car she had been in. Emily knew she could provide valuable information to the police, so she looked for the vehicle and wrote down the license plate number. She sent this information to authorities in hopes that it could help with the investigation. While waiting, Emily continued her own investigation. She scoured social media, looking for any mention of an Uber driver named John who might be related to the incident. She also reached out to other Uber riders in the area, asking if anyone had experienced anything similar. It was in one of these conversations that Emily got her first concrete clue. One of the passengers reported that they had had a similar experience with an Uber driver named John, who took them to an unknown location and acted in a threatening manner. However, this passenger managed to escape before anything worse happened. Another passenger's tip solidified the idea that John was involved in something sinister. Emily shared this information with the police, who now had a pattern of suspicious behavior that could be used to identify the driver. As authorities continued to investigate, she decided to go undercover and create a fake profile on social media, posing as a passenger looking for a ride. She knew it was risky, but she was determined to get to the truth. Emily made contact with an Uber driver, using a fake name and a convincing story. She acted as if she was interested in a late-night ride and asked the driver to pick her up at a location close to where she was dropped off that fateful night. The driver accepted the trip, and Emily prepared herself for the meeting. At night, Emily dressed in low-key clothes and waited at the agreed meeting point. The Uber driver, whose name on the app was David, arrived and stopped the car. He didn't seem to suspect that Emily wasn't who she said she was. As the car moved through the dark streets, Emily tried to gain David's trust. She asked him about the job and the experience of being an Uber driver. Emily was determined to find out if David was in any way related to the mysterious John. As the conversation progressed, Emily realized that David was not exhibiting suspicious behavior. He appeared to be an ordinary Uber driver who was just doing his job. The idea that he could be the same driver from the night of the incident began to seem increasingly unlikely. Emily ended the trip and got out of the car. She felt discouraged and frustrated. Their attempts to uncover the truth were leading to dead ends, and the Uber driver was still at large. However, she would not give up so easily. Emily was determined to discover John's identity and understand what he was up to that terrifying night. She knew that to do so, she would need to continue her search for answers, no matter what. Despite her initial efforts to uncover the truth about the Uber driver named John, Emily was still searching for answers. She knew she couldn't give up, as the feeling of terror and uncertainty from that night continued to haunt her. Emily was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery and ensure no one else faced what she had experienced. After the disappointment of her attempt to infiltrate as a passenger, Emily turned her attention to the information provided by the passenger who had reported a similar experience with Jayon. She was able to track down this passenger and convinced him to share more details about his own experience. The passenger's report was harrowing. He explained that, after being taken to an isolated location by John, he managed to escape from the car and ask a local resident for help. Authorities were contacted, but the driver was gone before they could arrest him. This new information solidified Emily's belief that John was involved in a series of sinister incidents. She shared these findings with the police, who were now more committed to tracking down the missing driver. As investigations continued, Emily also decided to revisit the area where she had jumped from the car that fateful night. She wanted to see if there was something she had missed in the darkness, something that could help solve the mystery. Armed with a flashlight and courage, Emily explored the area where the driver had left her. The rain had given way to a starry night, but the place was still as gloomy as she remembered. Despite searching the land for a while, Emily didn't find any concrete clues. However, just as he was about to give up, his flashlight illuminated something on the ground. It was a small, shiny metal object. Emily picked it up and realized it was a piece of key. She felt a shiver run down her spine when she considered that it could be related to the Uber car. The key could somehow be linked to John. Emily immediately handed the key over to the police, who agreed to investigate its possible connection to the missing driver. While awaiting the results of the investigations, Emily continued her search for information on her own. She scoured the internet for news of other incidents involving Uber drivers in the region. She found some alarming reports from passengers who had had disturbing experiences, such as unexplained route deviations and threatening behavior from drivers. The reports Emily gathered were shared with authorities, and pressure was mounting for Uber to cooperate in the investigation. The company was asked to provide information on all drivers operating in the area on that fateful night. Finally, investigations revealed a crucial breakthrough. Police discovered that John was actually a fake name used by a driver who had been banned from Uber for previous reports of suspicious behavior. He had re-registered under a different name to avoid the company's detection. With the real identity of the driver revealed, police launched an intensive search. The man behind John was located and arrested, and evidence suggested he was involved in a series of disturbing incidents involving Uber. With the nightmare finally coming to an end, Emily felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. She knew her search for answers had helped identify and stop the dangerous driver. Furthermore, the exposure of the case caused ride-hailing companies to review their security policies and procedures. Emily's traumatic experience left her emotionally scarred, but it also made her stronger. She became an advocate for passenger safety and began sharing her story to raise awareness of the potential dangers involved in ride-hailing. Emily had faced horror and the unknown that dark night, but her determination and search for answers turned her into a survivor and defender of everyone's safety.